Hello, this is Michael Kujawski. Thanks for paying close attention to this. I do have a my first YouTube channel at Michael Kujawski. Today is Saturday, August 27th, 2022, and a one way of practicing English, if you speak a foreign language such as Spanish or Chinese, is to go very slowly, pronouncing each syllable and knowing the different pronunciations of each vowel within each syllable. So now along those lines, I'd like to just read a couple pages to you. You can practice stuff like this in your house without a lot of fanfare. I'd like to read one page from a story by a classic American writer from the 19th century, Edgar Allan Poe. This is from a story he wrote called Some Words with a Mummy. You would think it might be easier to learn a foreign language than it would be to try to talk to a mummy. I don't know exactly what language mummies speak. Here they mention Egypt and Egyptian. I would also like to read one page from a book I self-published in January of 2015. This one is called After Dark by Michael Kujawski, a suspense novel. So let me get started here with Edgar Allan Poe, Tales of Mystery and Imagination. And this is called a collection in English, Wordsworth Classics. This one was published in 1993 by Wordsworth Editions Limited in Great Britain. So here's what it looks like. A collection of classic stories by a very famous American writer everyone knows, Edgar Allan Poe. Now, how would you pronounce that? E can be pronounced E, but it can also be pronounced as in this case, and D is D. Edgar Allan Poe. And by the way, O can be pronounced a long O, or a short O, In this case, a long O, Poe, Edgar Allan Poe. All right, I want to read page 406, and it spills over a little onto 405 and 407. Some words with a mummy. And by the way, I'm in Houston, Texas today. And upon my word, I am at a loss to know how or why it was that we pursued neither the one nor the other. But perhaps the true reason is to be sought in the spirit of the age, which proceeds by the rule of contraries altogether, and is now usually admitted as the solution of everything in the way of paradox and impossibility. Or perhaps, after all, it was only the mummy's exceedingly natural and matter of course air that divested his words, that means the mummy's words, and I still don't know what language mummies speak. Do mummies speak in Chinese? I don't know. Divested his words of the terrible. However this may be, the facts are clear, and no member of our party betrayed any very particular trepidation or seemed to consider that anything had gone very especially wrong. There is one word in there, trepidation, a long word that means nervousness, fear, trepidation. Whenever we slow things down, learning a foreign language, it's easier for everyone to learn it and pick up the pace. Trepidation. shun. Trepidation. That means fear and nervousness. I'll continue reading. This is a way of practicing with your throat, your mouth, your tongue, and your whole face. For my part, I was convinced it was all right and merely stepped aside out of the range of the Egyptian's fist. Dr. Panamer thrust his hands into his breeches pockets, looked hard at the mummy, and grew excessively red in the face. That meant he was embarrassed. Mr. Glidden stroked his whiskers and drew up the collar of his shirt. Mr. Buckingham, well, that sounds like a British name. Mr. Buckingham hung down his head and put his right thumb into the left corner of his mouth. Well, you'd hang down your head, you take your right thumb, and you put it in the left corner, left of your mouth. That reminds me of a common Americanism of a small infant or toddler sucking his thumb. That's called sucking your thumb, like this. You take your thumb, you're 3 years old, 1 year old, and you suck your thumb. The Egyptian regarded him with a severe countenance for some minutes, and at length, with a sneer, said, "Why don't you speak, Mr. Buckingham? Did you hear what I asked you or not? Do take your thumb out of your mouth." Mr. Buckingham hereupon gave a slight start, took his right thumb out of the left corner of his mouth, and by way of indemnification, inserted his left thumb in the right corner of the aperture above mentioned. Not being able to get an answer from Mr. B, Mr. B refers to Mr. Buckingham. That is called shorthand. It just took the first letter from Buckingham's name. Buckingham is spelled Buckingham. Such a long name back in Old England, and Edgar Allan Poe, the original writer, just shortened it to Mr. B. The figure turned peevishly to Mr. Glidden, and in a peremptory tone demanded in general terms what we all meant. Mr. Glidden replied at great length in phonetics. There's a 3-syllable word, pho-ne-tics. 3 syllables, pho-ne-tics. Phonetics. Phonetics. And but for the deficiency of American printing offices in hieroglyphical type, it would afford me much pleasure to record here, in the original, the whole of his very excellent speech. I may as well take this occasion to remark that all the subsequent conversation in which the mummy took a part was carried on in primitive Egyptian. Well, now we know. What language did the mummy speak? If you ask a question, you might raise your hands. What language did the mummy speak? It says here on page 406 of Tales of Mystery and Imagination, a collection. It says Egyptian, Egyptian. What language did the mummy speak? Primitive Egyptian, also called Egyptian. Then spilling over onto page 407, through the medium, parentheses, so far as concerned myself and other untraveled members of the company, through the medium, I say, of Messrs. Glidden and Buckingham as interpreters. Well, there's something. If you're gifted enough, smart enough to learn a foreign language, then you won't need an interpreter. Unfortunately, myself and almost everyone every place needs the interpreters that are available on the internet and the electronic devices with interpretation and interpreter apps that I've seen available in China in bookstores. Okay, so this was a famous American writer, Edgar Allan Poe. My name, by the way, is Michael Kujawski. I have taught English, ESL, EFL, in full classroom English to all the different age levels, university, high school, and children, first in Korea and then in China. I do have 170 hours of TEFL, teaching English as a foreign language, and TESOL, teaching English to speakers of other languages. I have 170 hours of TEFL and TESOL certificates. My name, by the way, is also 3 syllables. It is difficult to pronounce. Kujawski. And the first name is Michael, Michael. Okay, now I'm going to read a page here from this trade paperback, also called a self-published book, because I published it myself, because no one would pay me to publish it, and I wrote it. I published this in January of 2015. It's called After Dark, a 200 or 396 page suspense novel that I wrote. And on the cover it says After Dark, Michael Kujawski, A World Full of Life and Sorrow. And it shows a dark picture of some pine needles in a forest. I self-published this through a self-publishing company called booklocker.com. And now I would like to turn to page I turn to page 226 and 227. I'm going to read page 227 in After Dark by Michael Kujawski. Do you suspect a practical joker at the Observer? That's a newspaper, a fictitious newspaper, I made that up, in a fictitious town called Kirkville. Do you suspect a practical joker at the Observer is responsible for the junk mail and prank call? No, Mark answered, recalling the typically sober atmosphere inside the newsroom. One day a mailman delivers postal mail in the United States, like letters, paper, like this, to a mailbox to a U.S. resident. One day the mailman or someone else stuffed 20 pieces of mail, most of it pamphlets, into my mailbox. I drove to the postal station on Main Street and in a state of hostility asked, "What's the meaning of this?" After I calmed down, the postal clerk advised me to have my name and address removed from junk mail advertising lists. In order to mail a paper letter in the United States, it has to have an address, which is the place where the letter goes, also called a destination. So the mailman knows where to deliver your mail. It has your name. If someone were mailing to me, my name, Michael Kujawski, on the letter or package, then my address, which is numbers and the name of the street, similar to China and other foreign countries, and then the city, and then the postal code. What's the meaning of this? After I calmed down, the postal clerk advised me to have my name and address removed from junk mail advertising lists. Junk mail is a form of advertising in the United States. You can get it in the spam section of your computer tube or in your mailbox at your house out on the street. Junk mail is advertising. It's stuff people did not ask for, but they got, and sometimes you can go shopping on the internet or through the mail, and you buy items off junk mail. I refused. I said I shopped through the mail and over the internet. I make purchases from advertising pamphlets and email I receive. It was just that. Well, some of the mail, when there was too much mail, piled up in desk drawers and cardboard boxes around my house. It's a nuisance that distracts from the taciturn side of my writing work, but it's the way I live. In May, Mark had mentioned this matter to Deputy Brinkman. Mark told Reggie that he was struggling against an onslaught of junk mail. That meant there was a colossal amount of junk mail, a giant amount, a lot of junk mail, a big amount of junk mail. Reggie suggested that he should throw away the pile of junk mail. You know, a pile goes up and up and up. You keep making piles of books, piles of letters, and suddenly you've got piles all over your house. Piles of pillows, piles of food, piles of clothing. P-I-L-E. The I is pronounced a long I. I can also be pronounced as a short I. If it were P-I-L-L, it would be pronounced pill, short I. But since there's an E at the end of pile, P-I-L-E, that means to pronounce a long I. P-I-L-E. The E is silent and not pronounced. P-I-L-E. Pile. Pile. One syllable. In May, Mark had mentioned this matter to Deputy Brinkman. Mark told Reggie that he was struggling against an onslaught of junk mail. Reggie suggested that he should throw away the pile of junk mail and delete everything from his spam folder every day. Well, that's something that I like to do, and so do a lot of people, to go into your computer, email, and delete whole folders, especially the spam folder. Mark did just that. He stopped signing up for internet alerts and newsletters. He collected fewer pamphlets. He hadn't even mentioned the junk mail to Adrian until several months ago. Last summer, Mark also informed a neighbor he'd involuntarily received animal rights literature, even though he did not normally write about animal rights issues. As Mark recalled, he had received the animal rights advertising for several years before the emails and pamphlets mysteriously ended on their own. So this animal rights literature, also called pamphlets, were defending the legal rights, the entitlements of pets in the United States, animals, pet dogs, pet cats. A dog goes ruff, 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 and a cat goes meow, meow, meow. And pets in America have legal rights. Okay, well, I suggested this, reading books aloud, like After Dark by Michael Kujawski, and Edgar Allan Poe, his collection of short stories, in this case called Tales of Mystery and Imagination. I suggest reading them out loud to get exercise with your lips, your teeth, your mouth, your throat, and then you feel more confident talking to people in a foreign language. I did this when I was in high school. I was on the forensics team for 3 years when I was in high school as my second year of high school, my third year, and my fourth year, called sophomore, junior, senior. For 3 years, I was on the forensics team, and I gave an original speech, usually 8 minutes, sometimes 4 minutes. And I would practice by going in my house and reading Edgar Allan Poe out loud, a famous classics author from the 1800s, also called the 19th century in the United States. Well, I want to thank you for letting me get some more practice. Now it's on YouTube, and for letting me tell you that. Now my next challenge is to send something like this to China, where I taught in the classroom, or to South Korea, or to Mexico, or to any country where English, while it is a universal language, where it's not the primary language. China is Chinese, and I think Mexico is Spanish. So, have a nice day.